After I was reborn, I brought all four of Gujia's mistresses into the mansion. In my previous life, I forbade Gujia from taking concubines, so he set up households for his female confidants in various places. And each of them lived as lavishly as a legitimate wife. The mistresses never said paths and coexisted peacefully. But in this life, they can only fight to the death within these small courtyard walls. Main text. After I died, Gujia grieved briefly for a few months, then cast me out of his mind and began to seek pleasure. But perhaps I couldn't accept my fate. My spirit continued to follow him. I watched him travel to Jinan in the spring, sailing on Daming Lake with Gigi. In the height of summer, he ventured deep into the Miao Mountains, standing shoulder to shoulder with Yixing to gaze at the sky filled with fireflies. In the crisp, clear days of autumn, he rode horses across the grasslands with Xiaoyan, looking so dashing. And when the first snow fell, he rushed back to the capital to reunite with Hongxiu. Looking back on those days, as the only daughter of the grand tutor of the court, I was betrothed to the young Marquis of the Anbei Marquisatite. Was supposed to be an enviable love story. Why in the end did I end up in such a state? Was it simply because I was jealous and lacked the magnanimity to tolerate others? Thankfully, heaven took pity on me and granted me a second chance. This time, I will be magnanimous to the very end. When I opened my eyes again, I saw Xiaoyan, the very woman who had filled me with seething hatred in my previous life. She was originally a girl Gujia met while traveling through the northern frontier. Yet she followed him all the way back to the capital. In the end, Gujia was moved by her devotion, and the two were married. In my previous life, I lost my temper and lashed out, slapping her across the face. That single slap, combined with the humiliation of being barred from the mansion, caused Xiaoyan to harbor a deep hatred for me. Xiaoyan was born on the grasslands and was exceptionally skilled at training horses. That year, she gave birth to Gujia's eldest son while away from home. Soon after, I became pregnant. On my way to Xiaoyan Temple outside the city to pray for blessings, she startled my horse with a whistle. I was thrown from the carriage, and the child in my womb turned to blood, leaving me unable to conceive ever again. Yet my husband rebuked me for accusing Xiaoyan, claiming I had no evidence. Now, she clings tightly to my husband, her delicate hands, whether intentionally or not, gently caressing her still flat belly, outwardly respectful. Her eyes betray unhidden triumph. Gujia spoke as he had in a past life. Xiaoyan is the daughter of a respectable family, and now she carries my child. I intend to take her into the household and grant her a proper status. Then do so. I nodded, seeing that I wasn't making a scene as I usually did. The words Gujia had been about to speak hung suspended in the air. Okaying somewhat comical, as if he couldn't believe I would yield so easily. He stiffened his neck and was about to repeat himself. Do you know? I know, I said, picking up on his unspoken thought with understanding. Xiaoyan is pregnant. You must not let her down. You must give her and the child a home. Xiaoyan's eyes lit up, and she spoke joyfully. Madam, you really don't blame me. What are you saying? I stepped forward, reaching out to take Xiaoyan's hand. Xiaoyan instinctively flinched away, and I smiled helplessly. As the primary wife, I should naturally be virtuous and magnanimous. You are helping to expand the Marquis family line. I should be thanking you. Gujia never imagined I would agree to taking a concubine so readily. Watching the scene of harmony between wife and concubine from the sidelines, he showed not a trace of joy. Instead, an inexplicable emotion flickered in his eyes. However, the shift in my tone drew both pairs of eyes to me. Since Miss Xiao Yan is to enter the mansion, we must not neglect the other young ladies. We can't let people say that our marquis's household only allows women to enter after Ey already pregnant. If others see it that way, I'm afraid the censors might file a formal complaint. Why not bring in Hongxiu? Who left your chambers? Gigi from Jinan. And Yexing from Miaoling as well. It'll save us the trouble of making multiple trips and drawing unnecessary attention. My thoughtfulness and generosity actually caused Gu Jia to flee in panic, claiming he needed to seek the young lady's consent. But since Xiao Yan had already taken the high road, how could the other three are to lag behind? 7 days later, at the auspicious hour, 4 pink palanquins lined up neatly before the side gate, none yielding to the others, blocking the alley completely and drawing a flurry of whispers from the townspeople. Madam, all 4 concubines have arrived. How should we arrange the order of the entry into the mansion? The estate steward came to seek my guidance. Looking helpless, I feigned confusion. These are all the Marquis's most cherished women. It would be inappropriate to shortchange any of them. We'd best ask the Marquis to decide. Gu Jiazai had just returned from court when he received the report. He had no choice but to rush back to the side gate, upon hearing that his 4 concubines were arguing fiercely in front of him. Gu Jiazai grew angry and finally ordered them to line up by age and enter the mansion one by one. Unexpectedly, after the tea had been served, another dispute arose. Xiao Yan, her belly protruding, greeted me with a warm smile. The other day, when the Marquis brought me to pay my respects to the lady, we hit it off immediately and felt a deep connection. After returning home, I specially prepared a gift to present to you. Sister, as she raised her hand, a maidservant handed me a brocaded box from the table. This fan face was embroidered by me personally. The peonies are majestic and elegant, perfectly suited to your grace. I ran my fingers over the fan face with a smile. Auntie Yen, you are carrying a child and have already rendered great service to the Marquis's household. How could you have gone to such trouble with such laborious work? As long as you like it. Sister, after the pleasantries, Xiao Yan got straight to the point. I passed by Jinxiang courtyard earlier and saw how spacious and open it is. I took quite a liking to it. If it could become my future home, that would be most excellent. Jinxiang courtyard was the closest to the marquee and the largest and most opulent courtyard aside from the main residence. Xiao Yan clearly intended to establish her superiority over the other concubines the moment she entered the mansion. But the others weren't fools. How could they possibly agree? Ha! Yi Xing let out a cold snort. Who do you think you are? Don't forget that I am not only the Marquis's bedmate, but also his savior. It's merely a courtyard if I were to ask for it. How could he refuse me? Years ago, when Gu Jia was traveling in Nanzhao, he accidentally wandered into a dense forest and was poisoned by the miasma. It was Yi Xing who saved him. A debt of life-saving grace is like that of a parent who gave one new life. If Yi Xing hadn't entered the mansion as a concubine, the entire Marquis's household would likely be indebted to her. And I, as the Marquis's wife, would have to kowtow to her. You're still young, sister, so naturally you can't understand the hardships of bearing and raising children. Xiao Yan stroked her belly, her face radiating the tenderness of an mother. Children always need their parents' constant companionship. To make it convenient for the Marquis to visit the child after returning home each day, it would be best for me to reside in Jinxiang courtyard. Enough with the sister business. My mother bore only me, didn't try to claim kinship. Yi sh. Ing showed Xiao Yan no mercy whatsoever. So what if you're pregnant? Until the baby is born, it's nothing more than a lump of flesh in your belly. What's so precious about that? You. Xiao Yan's eyes widened in shock. She never expected anyone to be so blunt and unsparing. I had to step in to smooth things over. Enough. This is getting completely off track. From now on, we're all family. It's just a courtyard, what's there to fight about? Xiao Yan looked away, refusing to respond to my words. Yi Xing was even more defiant. I don't care about titles. I'm here only to be with Brother Jia. I can't stand the insincere niceties of you women in the inner quarters, even though we'll be living under the same roof. It's best we keep our interactions to a minimum. Sigh. I covered my eyes with my hands in exasperation. One of you is the biological mother of the Marquis's future eldest son, and the other saved his life. You read both the most important people to him. I can't just arbitrarily decide where you'll live. So I'll go to the training grounds and ask the Marquis for his instructions. Soon. A maidservant returned with a message from Gu Jia, stating only that Xiao Yan was unwell and should be allowed to choose her living quarters first. Xiao Yan instantly grew smug, leaning on the maidservant's arm. She rose gracefully and retired to her room to rest. Yi Xing watched Xiao Yan, her eyes brimmy, ing with unconcealed jealousy. Truth be told, among these four, it is Yi Xing I fear the most. Yi Xing's mind is simple, yet she is the most ruthless. In my previous life, she resented me for forcibly keeping Gu Jia within the mansion, preventing her from seeing him. So she planted a heart-devouring poison on me, causing me to grow weaker day by day until I died young. In this life, I will make her and Xiao Yan turn on each other. Now that the best courtyard had found its owner, the allocation of the remaining three was much more peaceful. Hongxiu and Xixi simply said they will leave everything up to me. So I decided their placements without much hesitation. All three concubines had already left, with only Hongxiu remaining seated at the lower table. I had no choice but to steel myself and continue dealing with her. You've been here for a long time and are familiar with everything. Now that you're back, if you need anything, just take your token and go to the steward to request it. Hongxiu had originally been Gu Jia's maidservant. One day, when Gu Jia was drunk, he mistook Hong Ziuho had come to bring him a hangover remedy for me. And the two of them, by a twist of fate, consummated their union. The next morning, I naturally threw a huge fit, but as Hongxiu wept and pleaded her innocence, I held my anger in and could not take it out on her. At that time, Gu Jia and I had been married for less than half a year, and we were still deeply in love. Gu Jia had no choice but to send Hongxiu away from the estate, but since she was a native-born servant of the Gu household and had lost her virtue, out of consideration for their past bond, Gu Jia could only continue to look after her. Hongxiu was very perceptive. Whenever Gu Jia and I had an argument, she would always soothe his emotions, like a flower that understands human speech. Before long, the two of them grew closer. It has been several years since we last met, but your ladyship's grace and poise have only grown more radiant. Hongxiu approached me and curtsied gracefully. To have the opportunity to return to the mansion and serve you in my lifetime is already a great blessing for Hongxiu. From now on, I shall follow your every command. She's come to pledge her loyalty. I returned the favor with a compliment. You're the most thoughtful of all, with you looking after the Marquis. I couldn't be more at ease. Seeing that Hongxiu was lingering and reluctant to leave, I put on an air of patient listening. My lady, you saw for yourself today those two sisters are not easy to get along with. She sighed, her face a picture of loyalty. I just feel for you, madam. The scions of the Grand Tutor's household to be looked down upon by the daughters of these rough-and-tumble outlaws. It's truly. What can be done? I had to adopt an expression of utter despair. The Marquis's heart isn't here. I can only grant him his wish. Hongxiu hadn't expected that in just 4 or 5 years, if head wife. One so headstrong and jealous would have lost all the spirit I once possessed. Seeing that she couldn't incite me to oppose Xiaoyan and Yixing, she gritted her teeth, hiding the disappointment in her eyes, thinking only that there was plenty of time ahead and that she would return to plot in secret. Before leaving, she did not forget to reaffirm her loyalty to me. This servant is devoted only to his lordship and lady, my two masters. Should you require anything, I shall go through fire and water without hesitation. After dealing with the 4 concubines, I finally let out a sigh of relief and collapsed onto the soft couch. I never imagined that putting on such a show could be so exhausting. What did the imperial physician say when he arrived? He said that concubine Yan has always been in robust health. Perhaps she merely experienced a sudden emotional upheaval earlier, which triggered her discomfort. Once she takes the pregnancy-preserving medicine and rests quietly, she'll be fine. That's good. The play has only just begun. Nothing can happen to this child yet. Hearing this, I felt much more at ease. Go get a red envelope for the imperial physician. Make sure he knows the Marquis values this pregnancy greatly. There can be absolutely no complications. Miss the maid Lianya hesitated. The ceremony for taking the concubines today was so grand that the master and mistress have heard about it. You're on their way to the Marquis's mansion right now. I'm afraid they'll be here any moment. The scene from my previous life when news of my death reached them. My parents' hair turned white overnight as they stood at the mansion gates, furiously berating Gu Jia for his callousness still lingered before my eyes. This time, Gu Jia had taken 4 beautiful concubines at once, showing no regard whatsoever for me or the Grand Tutor's household. I feared this would only cause them further worry. Sure enough, as soon as my parents arrived, they ordered me to pack my dowry and return home with them. That good for nothing. We must divorce. We absolutely must divorce. Upon learning that I had personally consented to the concubines, their fury only intensified. I could only pour them tea to help them calm down. This was a marriage arranged by the imperial court. How could we simply annul it? Besides, Gu Jia is now deeply favored by His Majesty. I fear the emperor himself would advise us to settle this peacefully. Do not worry, father and mother. Your daughter has her own plans. There is no need for concern. This marriage between Gu Jia and me was one he sought out himself. In the year he came of age, he personally hunted a pure white deer and presented it to His Majesty. The emperor was overjoyed and asked what reward he desired. Gu Jia knelt on the ground with his back straight and said that if he could marry Su Taifu's daughter, Shi Ying, he would have no regrets in this life. So the emperor acted as matchmaker, and the empress bestowed a phoenix-headed hairpin as part of my dowry. In an instant, I became the most envied bride in the capital. In the early days of our marriage, we were harmonious and treated each other with the utmost respect. But Gu Jia was too full of youthful vigor. I couldn't stop him from trying to be a hero to others. I cried and made a scene. But in the end, I only pushed him further away, and our bond could never return to what it once was. But now, I don't really care anymore, for beautiful young women suddenly joined our household. But Gu Jia wasn't happy. Ever since that clash over choosing courtyards, Xiaoyan and Yixing have been at odds, relying on the gold nugget in her womb. Xiaoyan has repeatedly picked fights with Yixing. Yixing is no pushover either. Whenever Xiaoyan fails to attend to him at night, Yixing will rub his aching lower back during the morning greetings, or reveal a conspicuous red mark at his collar. As for me, I had to maintain a neutral stance between the two. On one hand, I would advise Xiaoyan. Lady Yi has stood by the Marquis through thick and thin. She will always hold a special place in his heart. You mustn't keep provoking her. The Marquis will surely feel sorry for her in the end. At the same time, I would send exquisite, rare delicacies and jewelry to Yixing's quarters, reminding her, though you are not ranked by seniority, Lady Yen is, after all, the birth mother of the Marquis's first child. Besides, pregnant women are naturally prone to mood swings. Why bother quarreling with her? It only puts the Marquis in a difficult position. After that, their conflicts became even more frequent, with minor and major altercations occurring once or twice a day. Watching his two beloved daughters lock horns, Gu Jia was at his wit's end. Yet it was at this very moment that Hongxiu demonstrated the noble character she had inherited from Yuhua. Her unassuming, non-confrontational nature offered Gu Jia a much-needed refuge, whether out of genuine concern for Hongxiu or a subtle warning to the other two. Gu Jia began visiting Hongxiu's quarters with increasing frequency. Xiao Ye and Yixing never imagined that while they were tearing each other apart, Hongxiu would be the one to reap the benefits. The two tacitly ceased their hostilities, and for a time, an eerie peace settled over the rear courtyards of the Marquis's mansion. One early morning, before I had even risen, I heard a commotion outside the courtyard. Hongxiu's eyes were red, and her own mother, Lady Li, was kneeling on the ground, one hand clutching her left cheek tightly. Oh, my Aunt Li. What's happened? You've been here for years, you shouldn't just kneel on the ground like this. Please get up. Since the main character had made such a grand entrance, I, as a supporting character, had to put on a show and play my part. Hongxiu was a house-born servant. Her entire family ate their meals here at the mansion. Her mother, Mrs. Li, was even the assistant in charge of kitchen supplies. In my previous life, although Mrs. Li hadn't done anything wrong, human nature is unpredictable. After being reborn, I found an excuse to set up my own small kitchen, and I kept my daily shopping separate from the main kitchen. Mrs. Li stood up hesitantly, seemingly revealing the fingerprints on her face by accident. Oh my! How did you get beaten like this? I feigned surprise. Who did this? Wen Yinxing, who serves Sister Yixing, went to the kitchen to fetch some pastries. She happened to see my mother drinking ginseng soup. My mother has already explained that she hasn't been feeling well lately, so I specifically set aside my own allowance to help her recover. But Yinxing, wow. LDN, listen. She insisted my mother was a traitor to the household and slapped her across the face. I went to confront Sister Yixing, but to my shock, she actually said that since I was once a slave, I'm lowly for life and don't even deserve to stand and speak with her. Han. Zaya clutched her handkerchief, constantly wiping away her tears. Her voice filled with sorrow. I know my birth is lowly. It doesn't matter if people look down on me, but I absolutely cannot tolerate my mother being treated so shamefully. Gu Jia, having received word of the incident, heard these words the moment he stepped through the door and immediately frowned in displeasure. I knew his thoughts better than anyone. Gu Jia himself looked down on Hongxiu's background, treating her as nothing more than a plaything. Yet he would never tolerate anyone else calling her lowly. Otherwise, what would he, Gu Jia, become? A depraved man who shares a bed with a lowly woman. Besides, he was naturally sentimental, seeing the beauty with tears streaming down her face like raindrops on pear blossoms. Those tears struck straight into his heart. Once he felt pity for her, it was inevitable that anger would flare up toward Yixing. Why is it so lively here? The other protagonist, Yixing, finally made her grand entrance. She arrived hand in hand with Xiao Yan, who was showing a noticeable baby bump, followed by Ji, who kept her eyes cast down. I wasn't surprised that Yi Sheng and Xiao Yan had joined forces. Both of them prided themselves on having met Gu Jia through fate. And as women of good families, they looked down on Hongxiu's servant who'd climbed her way to power through the bedchamber with utter contempt. They'd even felt sullied just by speaking to her in the past. Who would have thought that in recent times Hongxiu would be risen to such prominence by leveraging her old connections within the mansion, infuriating these two delicate young ladies to no end. I hadn't expected Gigi to be here. Though, in my previous life, I had no particular connection with Gigi. After she entered the mansion, she kept a low profile, and Gu Jia treated her indifferently. I assumed she was the type who didn't like to cause trouble. But today she's here with the other two. Could it be that she's choosing sides? Since Lady Yan is in the late stages of her pregnancy, she shouldn't go out and about so easily. It would be best for her to rest quietly, with just a few casual words. Gu Jia tried to pull Xiao Yan out of this dispute. How can the Marquis deny this concubine even the chance to speak? Xiao Yan, supported by her maid's hand, walked unhurriedly to the center of the room. I heard that concubine Hong and concubine Yi had a disagreement. So I came here to act as a neutral mediator and help reconcile them. But after hearing the full story, I can't help but feel that Li's slap was far too lenient. At these words, even Han Zuho had been feigning weakness in Gu Jia's arms could not help but lift her head and glare at Xiao Yan with indignation. My lord, please look. Xiao Yan motioned for the maidservant behind her to produce an account book. Then read aloud in a soft voice. CE. On the 4th day of the 5th month, 200 eggs were purchased today, totaling 2 taels of silver, 6 fish, totaling 6 taels of silver, 5 shur of wheat flour, totaling 3 taels of silver. The more she read, the paler Li Shi's face grew. E2. Come from the common people. How could I not know the price of everyday necessities? Take these eggs. For instance, outside, they cost no more than 2 cash each. Yet here with Li Shi, they've become exorbitantly priced. These are eggs laid by the finest white-feathered chickens. Li Shi couldn't help but retort. Shut your mouth, you wicked woman. You're just taking advantage of the Marquis and his wife's noble birth since they're out of touch with the common world. You dare to swindle them. You brag in the kitchen every day about being the Marquis's mother-in-law. And the other stewards, fearing that red concubine is in favor, dare not repo. RTU. That's why you've embezzled so much money for no reason. If I do the math, that must amount to over 10 taels of silver a month. That's enough for an ordinary family to live on for years. No wonder you dress more lavishly than even the county magistrate's wife. You're slandering me, Mrs. Li threw herself at Gu Jia's feet. My entire family has been utterly loyal to the Marquis's household. Does Lady Yan think she can convict this servant based on a single forged ledger? Ha! Xiao Yan let out a cold laugh. False accusation. You're so brazen now that you dare to skim off your master's provisions. How could I possibly accuse you without cause? If I hadn't happened to run into Gigi on the way here, I wouldn't have known you've even been skimming off the pastries, soups, and bird's nest from her daily rations. Hearing this, Gu Jia's expression shifted. He beckoned to Gigi. Is what your sister Xiao Yan says true? Gigi stood there timidly in her white gown, her eyes brimming with tears. She nodded, and another tear rolled down her cheek. It's absolutely true. Gu Jia sighed as he pulled Gigi into his arms. She obediently buried her head in his shoulder. Brother Gu, didn't you say that as long as I came back with you, I'd have a home again? This appeal clearly moved Gu Jia more deeply than Hongxiu's silent tears had before. He finally made his decision to expel the Li family from the Marquis's mansion and exile them to the estate to perform hard labor. My lord, I'm afraid that might not be appropriate. After all, They are Lady Hong's family, I said, stepping forward as if unable to bear it. To try and dissuade him, Yi Sheng, however, shook his head in disapproval. Madam, you are far too soft-hearted. Once corruption begins, it will only escalate. We absolutely cannot let this go lightly. Gu Jia turned to face me, trying to gauge whether my words were sincere or insincere. But he couldn't bear the sound of Jiao Jiao's sobs in his arms. Hongxiu is already a concubine. She ought to maintain the dignity befitting her station. How can she have family members who are mere servants? After everyone else had dispersed, I helped Hongxiu, who was still collapsed on the ground, to her feet with a look of pity. Silly girl. I thought the Marquis valued you so much that he would surely free your family. I never expected this to happen. Never mind. Now that Lady Yan has a child and Yi Sheng has the Marquis's favor. One has nobility and the other has dignity. As for us outsiders, we'll just have to be patient for now. The 26th of June was Xiao Yan's birthday. With so many events unfolding in the mansion lately, it was time for some joy. I should invite all the heirs over to celebrate together. Any past misunderstandings could be cleared up through open conversation. Gu Jia, suspecting nothing, gladly agreed. I spared no effort in organizing this birthday banquet for Xiao Yan, to suit her tastes. I specially invited a chef skilled in northern Chinese cuisine. Even the lamb was transported from the grasslands, said to be tender and free of gamey odor. The elders in the mansion all said that, as the legitimate wife, it would be one thing if I didn't take pleasure in not seeking out a concubine. But why give her such a grand display of favor? Hearing this, I sighed and said, what can I do? She is the apple of my husband's eye. If anyone were to upset her, it would be as if they were upsetting the Marquis himself. Xiao Yan was naturally delighted. During the banquet, she frequently raised her cup to me, repeatedly praising my virtue and saying that having a mistress like me was the greatest blessing of her life. A few days ago, when she was 3 months along, a maidservant secretly brought in a physician from outside. The physician took my money and, of course, gave Xiao Yan his word that she would surely bear a healthy, strong son. She had always had a reckless and arrogant streak in her nature. And now, regarding herself as the mother of the Marquis's eldest son, she began to act with the air of a mistress of the house. From that day on, Hongxiu seemed to lose all her spirit and began to shut herself away. Today too, she drank in silence, showing her submission. After the banquet, Gu Jia personally released a sky lantern for Xiao Yan, praying to the gods and Buddhas to bless her and her child with safety and peace. Xiao Yan nestled in Gu Jia's arms. The two whispered to each other as they watched the speckled light soar into the night sky. Judging by appearances alone, they were indeed a handsome young man and a beautiful woman, a picturesque scene. Just then, I noticed Yi Sheng standing silently behind the others. It's quite lively up F. Ront. Why don't you go play with the sky lanterns? Little Yi. She merely shook her head. As I drew closer, I noticed she was clutching a glass bottle tightly in her hand. What's this? Yi Sheng suddenly turned to me, her tone flat. Over a year ago, the capital had just seen its first snowfall. Brother Jia personally gathered snow from the eaves, then rode at full gallop for 3 days and 3 nights to deliver this glass bottle to Nanzhao. All because I once told him I'd never seen snow. She asked me, Madam, have you or seen Jia love anyone like this? Of course I have. Back then, I had merely mentioned in passing that when my father served as the prefect of Jinan, there was a shop outside the prefectural office that sold osmanthus cakes, fragrant, soft, and sweet, which were my favorite as a child. It was a pity that the journey was so long and arduous. I didn't know if I'd ever have the chance to taste them again. He set out alone on horseback, riding day and night without rest for 4 full days. When he returned, his eyes were bloodshot and his face caked with dust. Yet he held the osmanthus cake out to me. Ying. Try this. I had been the apple of my parents' eyes since childhood, never lacking in pampering or favoritism. Yet when I looked into the eyes of that young man, whose gaze was fixed entirely on me, my heart still felt a sudden, searing warmth from that intense and sincere affection. Hen Gujia loved someone. He always made them believe he would give everything for them, but he never loved just one person. Just like when the young man rode through Jinan, weary from his journey, drew his sword to drive off a gang of thugs, and rescued a flower girl being verbally harassed, as he held her close and spoke softly to comfort her. For a fleeting moment, he thought of the wife waiting for him in the capital, but Yixing would never understand that. I would never try to dissuade her. Her distraught state was exactly what helped me sleep soundly. Yixing regarded Gujia as her true love. She had come here precisely to be with him forever. She believed herself to be the one who mattered most. Yet in every matter, she found herself coming second to Xiaoyan. All of this was because of that child who had not yet been born. On the night of the 12th day of the 7th month, moon was bright and the stars sparse. I was strolling in the garden when I happened to spot a flickering light in a secluded spot. With the ghost festival approaching, I knew many servants would be paying respects to their departed loved ones. In past years, I'd turned a blind eye to those who secretly burned joss paper in the courtyard, as long as there was no risk of fire. But as I drew closer, I discovered that the tear-streaked figure was none other than Gigi. Gigi stood up nervously, trying to shield the pile of ashes with her skirt. Don't back away. I had Lianya help. Gigi over to me. Be careful not to set your skirt on fire. It's late at night. Why aren't you accompanied by a maid? Why are you here all alone? Gigi kept her head bowed, tears still clinging to her lashes. I miss my father and mother. I didn't know how to respond to that. Avoiding her doe-like eyes, I forced a dignified, forced smile. You're in the Marquis's mansion now, living in luxury and comfort, with the Marquis to rely on. Your parents, if they have spirits in heaven, can rest easy. No, they wouldn't be at peace. Gigi lifted her head. My parents had no grand ambitions. They only hoped for a simple, trouble-free life for me. They would rather have me marry a farmer than become a concubine in a wealthy household. That year, when Gujia helped me chase away those thugs, my parents were deeply grateful. Later, when we met him again by chance, my father invited him to stay at our home for a while. He said he owned a small plot of land and had no family obligations, which is why he could travel the world so freely. He stayed in Jinan for 2 months, coming every day to buy my flowers and taking me outside the city to climb a hill, where we could look over the mountains below. I really liked him, but when he stumbled into my bed, I struggled only to find it was no use. The next day, he left, leaving only a note promising he would never betray me. I clutched that note and waited at home. But in the end, all I received was a message saying his lawful wife wouldn't allow him to take a concubine, so he had to ask me to stay at home for the time being. He told me to trust him even if I couldn't enter the mansion. He would ensure I live a life of wealth and contentment. What a fine life of wealth and contentment. Tears welled up in Gigi's eyes again. My father hated himself for misjudging him. In his anger, he fell ill and died. My uncles and cousins divided up my family's estate, and my mother, overcome with grief and rage, threw herself against a pillar. Yes, when Gujia returned, He did puny. Those men. But what good does that do? My parents will never come back. I listened silently to this story, feeling momentarily dazed. In my past life, I spent my days in the mansion blaming heaven and earth, hating Gujie's mistresses for being nothing but seductive vixens. Yet I never realized that among his female confidants, there were actually pitiful souls. Ho had been deceived by him. So what do you intend to do? For the first time, I looked directly at this delicate young woman who usually seemed so fragile, as if a mere breeze could knock her over. Madam, please help me. Gigi suddenly knelt at my feet. Actually tonight, I let you see it on purpose. I hate Gujie, and I want him to pay the price. I know you're different from others. If you need anything, I'm willing to be your sharpest blade. I gently helped her to her feet. She was crying so hard she was nearly fainting. Yet her eyes remained fixed on me. I sighed. I had been reborn too soon to see whether this girl had succeeded in slaying the dragon in her previous life. On the second day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, according to custom, Gujie was required to accompany me back to my family's estate. Before we left, I specifically instructed everyone in my courtyard to keep the gates and doors tightly shut and no to venture out lightly. Who would have thought that the banquet had barely begun when the head steward rushed over to summon us back? My father had always deeply resented Gujie for his callousness. Now, he couldn't even be bothered to save face. Fuming with rage, Gujie looked somewhat awkward as well, pressing for details on what exactly had happened at the manor. Only then did the head steward whisper that Xiaoyan was suffering from abdominal pain and had already begun bleeding. Air is of the utmost importance. The Marquis and I should return to the manor at once. I tactfully offered an apology on Gujie's behalf to my parents and hurriedly had the carriage hitched to return home. The manor was already in complete chaos. The imperial physician shook his head, saying only that the pregnancy likely could not be saved. Concubine Yen shows signs of poisoning. Forgive my incompetence, but after examining everything she wears and eats, I've found no trace of the poison source. Concubine Yen struggled to sit up from the bed, her face contorted with rage. She pointed at each person in the room. In turn, was it you, or you? Her gaze sliced through the room like a knife, sweeping over me, Ji Zion Hongxiu, before finally settling on Yixing. Was it you? Was it you? She looked like a demon, her hair disheveled, and she lunged forward recklessly, startling Yixing so much that she fell to the ground. Ouch, ouch. My stomach hurts, Yixing cried, clutching her abdomen. Gujie's eyes lit up as if a thought had struck him. He hurriedly summoned the imperial physician to examine Yixing. After taking her pulse, the physician glanced at Xiaoyan on the bed, paused for a moment, then offered his congratulations to Gujie. Yixing was nearly overcome with joy. Brother Jia, we're going to have a baby soon. The scene was utterly absurd. Even I couldn't help but feel sorry for Xiaoyan. Not all fingers are the same length. It seems Gujie has a particular favorite in his heart. While one woman had just lost her child, he couldn't help but wallow in his own joy. Xiaoyan likely hadn't processed it yet. Or perhaps the shock was too great. She stared blankly at Yixing and Gujie, who were clinging to each other. It wasn't until Gigi's voice snapped her out of it. Oh my! What's this? How could there be such terrifying insects in Sister Yan's bedroom? Where her finger pointed, behind the vase, lay the lifeless bodies of two insects the size of bees. The imperial physician hurried forward. This insect is quite rare. It may well be the culprit behind Lady Yan's miscarriage. I shall take it back to the Imperial Medical Academy for thorough examination. Just as Gujie was about to nod, Yixing, in his arms, suddenly tightened her grip on his hand. He looked down and clearly saw the guilt in Yixing's eye. Never mind. The words he was about to speak fell flat. Perhaps they just happened to fly in from somewhere. A concubine's miscarriage is a matter for the inner quarters. I shouldn't have troubled the imperial physician. It was merely my own anxiety speaking. Seeing Gu Jia's refusal, the imperial physician was only too eager to distance himself from such sordid affairs. He quickly took his leave, leaving behind only the hysterical Xiaoyan. My lord, it must be that vile woman who harmed our child. Why won't you stand up for me and seek justice? Xiaoyan had genuinely longed for this child, and thus she hated the culprit with a vengeance. You cannot let her off just because she is pregnant. I want her child to pay with its life for mine. Enough. The viciousness in Xiaoyan's words shocked even Gu Jia. What has the innocent child done to deserve this? How can you be so cruel? He tried to reason with her. Your child has just passed away. And now Yixing is pregnant. How do you know this child hasn't been reborn in Yixing's womb? This remark completely shattered Xiaoyan. She even came to hate the man standing before her. How could my child ever accept such a lowly woman as its mother? Enough. Concubine Yan has truly lost her mind. Take her back to her room to rest. She is not to leave without cause. Gu Jia picked Yixing up in his arms and strode away. As he passed me, he merely tossed out a single sentence. Please see to it that everything here is taken care of. Madam, what a scoundrel. Now I'm stuck doing all the dirty, tedious work to ensure Xiaoyan could recover in peace. I moved her to a secluded courtyard. All provisions remained as generous as before, without the slightest reduction. And I went to visit her. She was quietly stroking a small garment. I recognized the pattern. It was the one she had embroidered, stitch by stitch, for her unborn child. She was wearing the clothes she had brought with her, a faint smile on her face, as if she had returned to the moment I first met her. When she was hiding behind Gu Jia, she said, Madam, you are a good person. A good person? Absolutely not. As a woman, I felt sorry for her loss of her child, but I will never forget that I, too, once embroidered a baby bodice with such anticipation for the little life growing inside me. Back then, I naively believed my life was about to take a turn for the better, even without Gu Jia's love. I thought I could live a good life with this child for the rest of my days. I would watch him grow from babbling toddler to marriage. There was always something to look forward to. I wasn't skilled at needlework. My fingers were pricked with needle marks. Yet I felt a sweet warmth in my heart. But that day's whistle, that runaway horse, shattered my hopes. I have known the pain of losing a child, so I understand the turbulent waves hidden beneath Xiaoyan's eyes. Calm as still water, though she was confined to her quarters, I did not forbid her from contacting those around her or the outside world. I knew she had her trusted maid secretly purchase poison, but I did not stop her. Let the flames of vengeance burn all the brighter. The weather was growing colder, yet the Anbei Marquis man's Ion was ablaze with activity. His Majesty had just issued an edict promoting Gu Jia to Chief Clerk of the Ministry of War, and officials under his command had come to offer their congratulations. Gu Jia and the men were drinking in the courtyard, while I and the other ladies of the household sip ped tea on the other side of a screen, watching Yixing bask in the adulation of the other ladies. As a concubine, I was not supposed to attend such occasions, but Gu Jia could not resist her coaxing and clinging, so he specifically instructed me to bring her along to see the world. Yes, Gu Jia forgave Yixing that easily. After all, they had shared life and death together. How could he cast that bond aside so lightly? Gu Jia felt as though he had lost a child, and resolved to cherish the one he had now all the more. showering Yixing with even greater affection. The other ladies, seeing the look in my eyes, understood that I did not mind and felt at ease chatting with Yixing. Yixing accidentally knocked over her tea. Frown Dan ordered. This newly made cloak is all stained. Quickly clean up this teacup. Yes. The young maid, meek and submissive, reached out to take the teacup. But a glint of silver escaped from her sleeve. In an instant, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The maid looked. Ed Yupit was Xiao Yan, disguised in a servant's attire, who had slipped in amidst the day's crowds and chaos. You wretch. She drew the dagger hidden in her sleeve and lunged at Yixing with a hideous grimace. The women's screams and the clatter of overturned cups and plates drew the male guests' attention. And they rushed over. They saw Xiao Yan, covered in blood, standing in the center, having struck her target. Xiao Yan was still not satisfied. She charged at Gu Jia with her knife. Death to the faithless. Amid the cries of alarm, Gigi spread her arms to shield Gu Jia. My heart leapt into my throat. Fortunately, many of the Ministry of War officials were former military officers, and they subdued Xiao Yan in a matter of moments. She collapsed no more than 30 feet from Gu Jia, her oaked eyes staring at him with a deathly glare that refused to close. Once he came to his senses, Gu Jia rushed frantically toward Yixing, and after a moment, let out a piercing wail. It was a poison that killed instantly upon contact with blood. It had consumed all the savings Xiao Yan had brought from outside the estate. And Yixing died before she even had a chance to utter a sound. With such a terrible tragedy having occurred, the banquet could naturally not go on. Gu Jia was consumed by grief, while I, my face ashen, went from guest to guest offering my apologies, begging not to let word of my family's scandal spread. Some kind-hearted ladies could not help but take my hand, sighing that the Marquis favored his concubines to the detriment of his wife, leading to domestic strife, and imploring me to take care of myself. Someone had already taken care of the Bodhi of Yixing and Xiao Yan, and by the time I returned, the bloodstains had been wiped clean. Gu Jia sat slumped in his chair. When he saw me, he finally spoke. Ying, have I truly been so reckless? You're laughing at me in your heart, aren't you? He didn't need me to respond at that moment, so I simply sat quietly by his side and poured him a cup of tea. He sighed again. They were both such lovely young women to begin with. How did things come to this? I truly believed that, given their temperaments, they would surely get along harmoniously. Perhaps, just like in our past lives, if they'd remained apart, they really could have coexisted peacefully. But now that they've all entered the Marquis's mansion, within these 4 square walls, isn't at they seek and can seek simply a little sincerity and a little affection from the one they love. These things are laid bare before them, and they have no choice but to fight for them. My lord, please take comfort. Those were the only words I could offer. This isn't your fault. Don't blame yourself. Have a cup of tea. Ying, I've neglected you these past few years. Do you hold it against me? 2 women have died, and yet he comes to me to speak of old affections. As your lawful wife, I must be virtuous and magnanimous. How could I possibly blame you? My lord. Gu Jia smiled with satisfaction, then took my hand again, sending a shiver down my spine. Having gone through this, I've come to a profound realization. A reformed rogue is worth his weight in gold. Ying, I swear to heaven that from this day forward, I will cherish only you, my virtuous wife, and Gigi, my beautiful concubine. That is enough for this life. I withdrew my hand without showing any emotion. I'm afraid there's quite a commo tie-in in the mansion today, Your Excellency. Why not go rest in my main courtyard? No. I'd rather go to Gigi's place. Gu Jie waved his hand and walked toward Gigi's courtyard, gazing at the untouched teacup. I sneered inwardly. That scoundrel, though he spoke sweetly just now. Deep down he must harbor some suspicion toward me. It makes sense. After all, since Xiao Yan managed to escape from the back courtyard, he must suspect I had a hand in it. Naturally. He trusts Ji Ziwo just shielded him with her own body more than he trusts me. I picked up the cup and drained it in one gulp. Little did I know that barely a moment of calm had passed before the man Shaun erupted in commotion once more. It's terrible. Madam, the Marquis is coughing up blood. By the time the imperial physician rushed in, Gu Jie was already bleeding from all 7 orifices and had drawn his last breath. I sat on the bed, clutching Gu Jie's hand tightly, unable to stop the tears from streaming down my face. Madam, I truly had no idea. Gigi knelt on the ground and swore to heaven. Seeing that his lordship was restless, I went to the main kitchen to brew a bowl of calming soup and fed it to him myself. Little did I know that the moment he finished drinking it, he vomited blood. Faced with such a grave incident involving a high-ranking official, the imperial physician dared not take it lightly. He carefully examined the remaining soup. It's poisoned. I slapped her across the face without hesitation. You personally fed the poisoned soup to the Marquis. And yet you dare claim you knew nothing. It really wasn't me. The head cook, kneeling nearby, suddenly snapped out of her daze. This calming herbal soup was originally prepared for Concubine Yi. Who would have thought that just after Concubine Ye's death, this soup would end up in the Marquis' stomach? Could it be that Lady Yi has become a vengeful spirit, seeking to take the Marquis with her? By then, a large contingent from the Ministry of Justice had arrived. After a thorough interrogation, they could only conclude that a rival concubine, vying for the Marquis' favor, had bribed someone in the main kitchen to poison the pregnant Yixin, yet the poison had ultimately ended up in The Marquis' mouth. Hong Xiu, the one who administered the poison, was naturally taken away by the Ministry of Justice. 3 lives lost in a single day. The outrageous events at the Marquis of Ande's mansion shocked the entire capital. To allow his concubines to fight to the death, only to have his own life taken in the end, this was truly scandalous. Tales of Gu Jie and his concubines' scandalous and bizarre affairs spread through every street and alley. Even His Majesty, high above in the imperial palace, shook his head in disapproval, sighing that while Gu Jie appeared noble and virtuous on the surface, in private he favored his concubines to the detriment of his wife, acting in a manner that defied all moral norms. The Empress Dowager and the Empress, sympathizing with the hardships I faced as the legitimate wife, specially dispatched a senior eunuch to bestow upon me many rare treasures. They also issued a verbal decree stating that, if I so desired, I might select an adopted son to carry on the lineage of the Marquis of Ande. I became the wealthiest and most respectable widow in the entire capital. Shortly after Gu Jie's funeral, Gigi left the Marquis' mansion, and with a chest full of gold. I asked my father to register her under a new household registry. She is now my distant cousin. Though the capital is bustling and vibrant, she does not care for it. She wishes to settle in Jiangnan, run a small business, and if she meets a young man to her liking, she would not mind remarrying. Life, after all, is best when it's simple and unassuming. The tea girl, as delicate as a gardenia, gave me a carefree smile. She said that if I ever had the chance to visit Jiangnan, she would surely warm wine, brew tea, and make my bed ready to welcome me. The story has come to an end. Thank you all for your companionship. See you in the next one.